2:15 in the morning, Central Iran. The RQ-180 stealth drone was already banked in a tight orbit over the jagged peaks surrounding Fordow. This was not a routine intelligence-gathering flight. The drone was chasing a massive electromagnetic spike that had briefly blinded regional satellites 3 minutes earlier. No known Iranian technology could produce a signature of that magnitude from deep underground. The mission had shifted from surveillance to an urgent investigation. The question was whether the drone was watching a scientific accident or the activation of a new strategic capability. The air at 50,000 feet was thin and freezing. Below, the mountains of the Qom province looked like black velvet under a moonless sky. The stealth aircraft moved through the darkness with a radar cross-section smaller than a sparrow. It was a flying wing, a ghost in the machinery of modern warfare. It was designed to see everything without being seen. The RQ-180 was the most sensitive asset in the United States inventory. It was a platform that officially did not exist. The Fordow facility was buried deep under solid rock. It was a fortress of centrifuges and reinforced concrete. For years, it had been the center of a global chess match between Tehran and the West. Tonight, the board had changed. The energy readings coming from the mountain were off the charts. They were pulsating in a rhythm that suggested a stabilized power field 7,000 miles away. In a windowless room in Nevada, the sensor operator leaned forward. His eyes were fixed on the thermal signature. The mountain was glowing on his display. It was not heat from an engine or a fire. It was something the software struggled to categorize. It looked like a ripple in the atmosphere itself. The supervisor stood behind him. His voice was calm but fast. Sierra 1. Confirm your status. Are we seeing a sensor ghost? The operator responded immediately. Negative. System is green. The return is physical. It is like the mountain is projecting a field directly into our path. Maintain orbit, the supervisor ordered. We need high-resolution telemetry before the sun comes up. The RQ-180 adjusted its flight path. The onboard computer calculated a new intercept for the source of the emission. It was now directly over the primary facility entrance. The stealth coating should have made the drone invisible to the batteries of S-300 missiles guarding the perimeter. But as the aircraft crossed the final security fence, something changed. Deep inside the Iranian radar bunkers, a screen flickered to life. A single radar dish on the ground began to rotate. It did not sweep the sky in a search pattern. It pointed directly at the empty space where the Sentinel was flying. The hunters on the ground were no longer searching. They had found their target. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:22 in the morning. The Khatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Headquarters. Deep within a hardened bunker near the city of Qom, the air was cool and smelled of ozone. Technicians in dark blue uniforms monitored a bank of high-resolution displays. This was the nerve center for the 4th Air Defense District. Their mission was simple: protect the Fordow enrichment plant at any cost. For 2 hours, the screens had been clear. Then, a flicker appeared on the secondary search radar. It was not a solid return. It was a smudge, a ghost in the nuclear-hardened clutter of the mountain peaks. The radar supervisor adjusted his headset. He was a veteran of 10 years in the Air Defense Force. He did not believe in ghosts. Track 42. Report status. The technician shook his head. Sir, the signal is intermittent. It is hovering at 50,000 feet. No transponder. No flight plan. It is moving in a slow, deliberate circle. The supervisor leaned in. He knew the signature of a stealth aircraft. It was not invisible. It was just very difficult to hold. The Americans. Or the Israelis. It is inside the restricted zone, the technician said. Orders. The supervisor did not hesitate. He picked up the secure line to the nearby tactical airbase. This is district control. Scramble the alert birds. We have an intruder over the mountain, 40 miles to the east, at Shahrokhi Air Base. The silence of the night was shattered by a siren. It was a low, mechanical wail that echoed across the tarmac. Two 4 Phantom interceptors sat in hardened shelters. Their engines were already warm. The crews had been on high alert since the energy spike at 2:15. The lead pilot climbed into the cockpit of the heavy fighter. He was a colonel with 3,000 hours in the air. He did not care about the age of his aircraft. He cared about the mission. He buckled his harness as the twin engines roared to life. The smell of jet fuel filled the hangar. The radio crackled in his helmet. Guardian 1. You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Vector 270. Climb to 30,000 feet. Your target is a high-altitude intruder. The colonel pushed the throttles forward. Guardian 1 copies. We are rolling. The 2 Phantoms roared down the runway and lifted into the black sky. They were not stealthy. They were loud, fast, and armed with heat-seeking missiles. Back in Nevada, the American sensor operator saw the heat signatures of the Iranian jets. They were 2 bright white dots climbing rapidly on his long-range display. We have 2 fast movers out of Shahrokhi. They are on an intercept vector. The supervisor watched the telemetry. The RQ-180 was still orbiting the mountain. It was collecting data on the energy pulse. It was too close to the Iranian border to run. Maintain course, the supervisor said. The Iranians cannot see us. They are just fishing in the dark. On the Iranian radar screen, the smudge became a solid point. The supervisor in the bunker smiled. We are not fishing. We have you. 2:28 in the morning. Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar. Inside the Combined Air Operations Center, the atmosphere shifted from routine monitoring to focused tension. The massive digital maps on the wall showed the Persian Gulf as a web of blue and red icons. One icon was flashing. It was the RQ-180. The United States Air Force Regional Command had just received a burst of encrypted data from the drone. It was a threat warning. The Sentinel was being painted by a high-energy fire control radar. A major at the intelligence desk spoke into his headset. Command, this is Intel. We are seeing active emissions from the Fordow perimeter, 5.5 gigahertz. That is a tombstone radar. The Iranians have transitioned their S-300 batteries to track while scan. The commanding officer stepped toward the console. His face was lit by the blue glow of the screens. That should not be possible. At that range and altitude, the Sentinel should be invisible to an S-300. Are they slaving the radar to an infrared search and track system? Negative, sir. The major adjusted the frequency display. The radar is locked directly onto our telemetry. It is not searching. It is tracking. It is as if they can see the airframe clearly. The situation was escalating. Stealth technology relies on the precise scattering of radio waves. It is a delicate balance of geometry and absorbent materials. But the energy spike from the mountain facility was changing the environment. The air around the drone was becoming ionized. A faint, shimmering trail was forming behind the aircraft. To the Iranian radar on the ground, the stealth drone was no longer a sparrow. It was a beacon. 200 miles away, the 2 Iranian F-4 Phantoms were climbing through 35,000 feet. Their afterburners were long, orange tongues of fire in the night sky. Inside the lead cockpit, the colonel looked at his tactical display. The ground-based radar was feeding data directly into his navigation computer. A small, green square appeared on his heads-up display. It was the target. The colonel spoke to his wingman. Guardian 2. I have a solid track. The intruder is 20 miles ahead. Level at 50,000. He is not maneuvering. Copy. Guardian 1. I am in trail. The wingman responded. Are we cleared to engage? Negative. We identify first, the colonel said. But arm your missiles. If he turns toward the facility, we do not wait for permission. The Phantoms were moving at Mach 0.9. They were closing the gap quickly. The RQ-180 was a slow-moving target, compared to the supersonic interceptors. Back in the Nevada control room, the sensor operator felt the sweat on his palms. He watched the 2 interceptors closing in on his screen. The distance was dropping. 18 miles. 15 miles. Boss. They are closing fast, the operator said. We need to break the orbit and head for the border. If they get a visual, the secret is out. The supervisor gripped the back of the operator's chair. He knew the stakes. If the drone stayed, it might be shot down. If it fled, they would lose the data on the most significant energy event in a decade. Hold the line, the supervisor ordered. Initiate the electronic warfare suite. Give them a false return. Mask our position. The operator's fingers flew across the keyboard. The RQ-180 began to emit a complex series of deceptive signals. It was designed to create dozens of ghost targets. On the Iranian radar screens, it was a digital smoke screen. In the Iranian bunker, the technician gasped. The single point on his screen suddenly shattered into 100 flickering dots. "Sir, the target is jamming. We have multiple contacts. I cannot find the primary." The supervisor at Fordow did not blink. "Ignore the radar. Revert to manual tracking via the optical sensors. We know where he was. Find him with the cameras." The electronic war had begun. The sky over Fordow was no longer empty. It was a battlefield of invisible waves. 2:34 in the morning, a secure conference room at Al Udeid Air Base. The air in the room was heavy. A brigadier general stood at the head of the table. He was looking at a live feed of the Southwest Asia theater. The red icons representing the Iranian Phantoms were now less than 10 miles from the blue icon of the Sentinel. On another screen, the electronic signatures of the S-300 missile battery were pulsing red. "The Iranians are leaning forward," the general said. "They have transitioned from a search track to a full fire control lock. That is an act of aggression. What are our rules of engagement?" A legal officer standing near the wall checked a digital tablet. "Sir, the RQ-180 is in contested airspace. Officially, we are in a period of heightened tension, but not open hostilities. Our orders are to avoid escalation. We cannot fire unless fired upon. If they fire, the drone is gone." The general countered. "It has no defensive weapons. It is a flying sensor. If we lose that airframe, they get the wreckage. They get the stealth coding. They get the data. We can authorize increased electronic countermeasures," the major added. "But if we jam their primary military frequencies, it will be seen as a kinetic strike. It could trigger a regional response." The general looked back at the screen. "We do not jam. Not yet. Tell the operators to maneuver for the border, but stay low. Use the terrain to mask the signature." In the sky over Fordow, the situation was becoming critical. Inside the lead Iranian fighter, the colonel saw his cockpit displays light up. The ground-based S-300 battery was feeding him a perfect firing solution. He could see the distance to the target closing on his digital readout. 8 miles, 7 miles. He keyed his radio. "Guardian 1 to control. I have a solid lock. The intruder is attempting to descend. Request permission to fire a warning shot." The response from the bunker was immediate. "Negative. Guardian 1. We need a positive visual identification. We must know if this is a drone or a manned aircraft before we engage. Close the distance. Use your searchlight." The colonel pulled back on the stick. The Phantom groaned as it climbed into the thinner air at 45,000 feet. He was now so close that he could see the faint shimmer of the ionized air behind the stealth drone. It looked like a ghostly veil of light. "I see him," the colonel whispered. He flipped a switch on his control panel. A high-intensity searchlight mounted on the nose of the 4 cut through the darkness. The beam of white light stabbed into the void, searching for the metal and carbon fiber of the intruder. In Nevada, the drone operator saw the light on his external camera feed. The screen went white for a split second as the beam hit the lens. "Boss, I am being illuminated. They are right on top of us. Execute a maximum rate turn," the supervisor ordered. "Drop altitude. Now." The RQ-180 tilted its long, slender wing and began a diving turn toward the west. It was trying to put the mountains between itself and the Iranian radar. But as it turned, it exposed its broad upper surface to the S-300 battery on the ground. "In the Iranian bunker," the technician yelled. "The target is maneuvering. He is diving for the border." The supervisor at Fordow slammed his fist on the desk. "He is not leaving. Not with what he saw. Guardian 1. You are cleared to intercept. Force down or destroyed. Do not let him cross the line. The Phantoms rolled into a pursuit. The hunt was no longer silent. It was a high-speed chase at the edge of space. 2:40 in the morning. The high peaks of the Zagros Mountains. The RQ-180 was at 38,000 feet and falling. It was no longer a graceful glider. The thin air at this altitude was churning with the wake of the two Iranian interceptors. The stealth drone was trapped in a box of electronic and physical steel. To the west, the border was still 40 miles away. At its current speed, the drone would not make it. Inside the Nevada control room, the supervisor gripped the edge of the console. The telemetry was turning red. The energy pulse from the Fordow facility was now interacting with the drone's own electronic warfare systems. It was creating a feedback loop. The aircraft was vibrating. The sensor operator struggled to keep the nose level. The operator spoke quickly. "Boss, the flight surfaces are sluggish. The ionization is messing with the pitot tubes. I am losing accurate airspeed readings." The supervisor looked at the secondary screen. The two Iranian Phantoms were now sitting 3 miles behind the drone. They were in a classic pursuit formation. "What is the status of the S-300 lock?" "Solid," the operator replied. "They are not just tracking us. They have a firing solution. If they loft a missile now, we have a 0% chance of evasion." The supervisor made a choice. It was the hardest decision of his career. "Contact Central Command. Tell them we are declaring a tactical emergency. Initiate the Tier 1 data wipe. If we cannot get the aircraft out, we burn the drive. Nothing remains for the Iranians to find." "Copy," the operator said. Initiating data purge. Thousands of miles away, inside the lead Iranian cockpit, the colonel felt the adrenaline of the kill. His radar warning receiver was silent because he was the one doing the hunting. He looked through his canopy. The searchlight beam was now fully illuminating the target. It was a smooth, gray shape. It had no tail, no windows, no visible intake. It looked like something from a dream of the future. The colonel had studied the silhouettes of American aircraft for 20 years. He knew exactly what this was. It was the white whale of the intelligence community, the Sentinel. The colonel keyed his radio. His voice was steady. "Control. I have a visual. It is a large, stealth profile, flying wing. It is marked with no national insignia. It is currently in a controlled descent. I am moving to the primary engagement position." The controller in the bunker responded. "Guardian 1. You are authorized to fire. Do not allow it to cross the border. Repeat. You are cleared to engage." The colonel flipped the cover off the missile trigger on his flight stick. He selected the heat-seeking Sidewinder equivalent. The high-pitched growl of the missile seeker filled his headset. It was a hungry sound. The missile had found the faint heat signature of the drone's buried engine. "I have a tone," the colonel said. His wingman pulled into a high-cover position. "Guardian 2 is in position. I am ready to follow up if the first shot misses." The colonel took a deep breath. His thumb rested on the red button. He was seconds away from starting an international crisis. He was seconds away from becoming the first pilot to down a top-secret American stealth asset over Iranian soil. In the Nevada room, a red light began to flash on the operator's panel. "Boss, we have a missile launch warning. The Phantom is hot." The supervisor did not look away. "Hold your course. Keep the purge running. We need 10 more seconds." The sky over the mountains was about to ignite. Both sides had committed. The Americans would not abandon the data. The Iranians would not abandon their sky. The colonel pressed the button. 2:44 in the morning. Over the Zagros peaks, the colonel pressed the red button. A heavy thud vibrated through the floor of the Phantom. The infrared missile dropped from the wing rail. It fell into the cold air for a heartbeat. Then, the solid rocket motor ignited. A brilliant white streak of fire slashed the darkness. The colonel watched the smoke trail. It was a clean separation. The missile was healthy. It was hunting. Inside the Nevada control room, the audio feed changed. A sharp, high-pitched chirping filled the room. It was the terminal launch warning. The sensor operator did not blink. His eyes were wide. His hands gripped the flight stick. He saw the heat signature of the missile on his secondary display. It was moving at 3 times the speed of sound. The intercept clock was counting down. 10 seconds to impact. The supervisor stood behind him. His voice was a rasp. Deploy flares. Maximum bank left. Now. The operator hit the emergency key. A volley of magnesium flares ejected from the belly of the RQ-180. They burned with a blinding white light. They fell toward the mountains like dying stars. The drone tilted its long wing. It pulled into a 6G turn. The carbon fiber airframe groaned under the stress. It was a maneuver the aircraft was never intended to perform. 2:44 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Iranian colonel saw the flares through his canopy. He saw the intruder dive into the blackness. He watched his radar display. The missile logic was advanced. It did not drift toward the burning decoys. It remained locked on the faint, steady heat of the stealth engine. The colonel keyed his radio. The intruder is maneuvering. The missile is still tracking. Impact in 5 seconds. The wingman in the second Phantom pulled his aircraft into a high vertical climb. He wanted a bird's eye view of the kill. From his vantage point, he saw the missile closing the distance. It was a needle of fire chasing a shadow. Behind him, the lights of Qom were a distant amber glow. He prepared to report the impact to headquarters. Inside the underground bunker, at Fordow, the technicians watched the energy levels. The subterranean spike had reached a critical threshold. The mountain was no longer just reflecting radar. It was emitting a massive field of directed energy. The ground-based sensors were screaming. The air above the facility began to glow with a pale blue light. This was the moment the experiment reached its peak. On the ground, the S-300 radar operators were witnessing something impossible. Their screens were not just jammed, they were distorting. The digital maps were warping. The altitude readings for both the drone and the interceptors began to spin wildly. One technician reached for his headset, trying to clear the static, but his fingers felt a sharp sting of static electricity from the console. The entire facility was vibrating, with a low, humming sound that resonated in the bones of everyone inside. 2:45 in the morning. The missile was within 100 meters of the drone. The proximity fuse was armed. In Nevada, the data feed began to fracture. The screen went to static, then back to life, then to static again. The operator felt the controls go dead in his hands. The drone was no longer responding to satellite commands. It was caught in the eye of an electronic storm. The missile was centimeters from the tail of the aircraft. 2:45 in the morning. The missile was inches from the drone's exhaust. The proximity fuse was active, but there was no explosion. The streak of white fire from the missile motor simply went out. It was as if the vacuum of space had suddenly reached down to 38,000 feet and extinguished the sun. The missile did not tumble. It did not veer off. It just became a dead weight of steel and high explosives. It fell silently into the darkness of the valley below. It was $1 million piece of technology rendered into a lawn dart in a single microsecond. Inside the lead Iranian Phantom, every light in the cockpit died. The engines did not flame out, but the digital displays went black. The colonel felt the flight stick go heavy as the hydraulic pumps lost power. He was flying a 50,000-pound brick at Mach 0.9. The sudden silence in his headset was more terrifying than the roar of the engines. Guardian 2. "I have total electrical failure," the colonel shouted. There was no answer. His radio was a dead block of plastic and wire. He looked through the canopy. The RQ-180 was no longer maneuvering. It was not diving for the border. It had leveled out. It was moving with a terrifying, robotic stability. It began to drift toward the center of the blue glow coming from the Fordow mountain. It was not flying. It was being drawn in like a moth to a flame. In Nevada, the screens were still a wall of gray static. The supervisor slammed his hand on the desk. "Link status. I need a satellite link." Tell me we still have a carrier signal. Nothing, sir, the operator replied. His voice was trembling. The heartbeat is gone. It is like the aircraft was deleted from the network. I have no telemetry, no GPS. The bird is off the grid. But the footage was still being recorded, high above the chaos. The wingman in the second Phantom had stayed far enough away from the energy spike to keep his systems online. His automated combat camera was still rolling. It was capturing the pivot. It was capturing the impossible. The video feed showed the drone bathed in the pale blue light from the facility. The aircraft did not wobble. It did not stall in the thin air. Its control surfaces moved with a precision and speed that no human pilot or remote operator could achieve. It turned 180 degrees in a fraction of a second. It was a maneuver that should have snapped the carbon fiber wings like dry glass. There was no radius to the turn. It was a vector shift. The drone was no longer being piloted from a trailer in the desert. It was not being jammed by the Iranian military. It was being operated by the source of the energy spike. Inside the Fordow bunker, the technicians stood frozen. Their screens were not showing radar returns anymore. They were showing a perfect, three-dimensional map of the sky above them. The map was not generated by their software. It was being projected onto their monitors from an external source. They watched as the blue icon of the American drone descended toward their front door. The colonel in the lead Phantom watched as the stealth drone began a slow, spiral descent toward the primary heavy vehicle entrance of the underground facility. It was a perfect, stabilized approach. The most secret aircraft in the American arsenal was delivering itself directly to the target it had been sent to spy on. The blue light reached a blinding intensity. Then, a silent shockwave rippled through the atmosphere. It was not a sound. It was a pressure that everyone felt in their inner ear. The colonel's cockpit lights flickered back to life. His engines surged as the digital controllers rebooted. He grabbed the stick and pulled the nose up, barely clearing the ridge of a mountain. He looked at his radar. The target was gone. The RQ-180 had vanished from every sensor in the theater. The mountain was silent again. The blue glow had extinguished. The energy spike on the ground sensors had flatlined to zero. Control. This is Guardian 1. The colonel gasped into his restored radio. The intruder is down. But it did not hit the ground. It went inside. It is in the mountain, 2:50 in the morning. The Nevada ground control station was a tomb of silent monitors. The supervisor gripped the operator's shoulder. His knuckles were white. Say again. You have no carrier signal. The operator shook his head. His hands were still hovering over the dead controls. Nothing. The link was severed at the moment of the energy pulse. We were midway through the Tier 1 data wipe. Only 68% of the local drive was cleared. If the aircraft is intact, its primary systems are still vulnerable. The air in the room felt thin. If the drone was on the ground, the most sensitive encryption keys in the United States military were now on Iranian soil. Even worse, they were inside an Iranian laboratory. The supervisor looked at the clock. It had been 5 minutes since the signal vanished. In that time, the geopolitical map had shifted. Inside the Fordow bunker, the confusion was equally absolute. The supervisor stared at the security feed for the main tunnel entrance. It was a massive, reinforced steel door designed to withstand a nuclear blast. It had not opened. There were no scorch marks on the rock. There was no smoke. There was no evidence of a high-speed collision. He keyed the radio to the circling Phantoms. Guardian 1. Report. Do you see a crash site? Do you see debris? The colonel's voice was shaky. Negative. Control. I am orbiting the primary entrance at 5,000 feet. There is no fire, no wreckage. The intruder simply moved toward the mountain and was gone. It was like watching a ghost walk through a wall. The wingman, Guardian 2, spoke up, his voice cutting through the static. Control. I have the combat camera footage. I am streaming it to you now. Look at the last 10 seconds. The video appeared on the bunker's main screen. It was grainy and filled with green night vision noise, but the detail was clear enough. The stealth drone did not collide with the mountain. It did not slow down as it touched the pale blue shimmer of the energy field. Its shape seemed to fold. It became a sliver of light. Then nothing. The energy field had acted like a liquid, swallowing the aircraft whole before snapping shut. The Iranian supervisor felt a chill. This was not a capture. It was not a shoot-down. He looked at the energy readings from the underground facility. They had flatlined to zero. The experiment was over. But the results were incomprehensible. In Nevada, the supervisor made a call to the Pentagon on a red-line phone. "Sir, we have a situation at Fordow. The Sentinel is down, but we are not classifying it as a loss to hostile fire. We are classifying it as a technical anomaly of unknown origin." The word anomaly was a professional mask for the truth. They were terrified. Both nations were now staring at the same empty patch of sky. They were wondering what had really been in control of the air over Iran. The tactical phase of the incident was over. The intelligence nightmare was just beginning. 5 hours of silence followed. The world did not yet know that a secret war had reached a stalemate of pure confusion. 7:50 in the morning. The Pentagon press briefing room. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the low murmur of 30 journalists. A spokesperson for the Department of Defense stepped to the lectern. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly into the cameras. His voice was practiced and neutral. He read from a single sheet of paper. Early this morning, a United States Air Force remotely piloted aircraft conducting a routine surveillance mission in international airspace experienced a severe mechanical malfunction. The aircraft was operating over the northern Persian Gulf when it suffered a total loss of flight control and propulsion. We have reason to believe the airframe was lost at sea. There is no evidence of hostile action, and we are currently coordinating with regional partners for a recovery operation. It was a masterpiece of strategic ambiguity. It was a lie designed to prevent a war, while the truth was being buried in a sub-basement 10 miles away. 8:45 in the morning, Tehran. Inside the headquarters of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the narrative was different. A general in a green uniform stood before a map of the Qom province. He spoke to a gathered group of state media reporters. "Our air defense forces have once again proven that the sky of the Islamic Republic is not a place for intruders." At 2:45 this morning, a Zionist American stealth drone violated our sovereign airspace near the Fordow facility. Our brave pilots and missile crews tracked the target and neutralized it with a single precision strike. We are currently in possession of the wreckage. Our engineers are beginning the process of reverse engineering the enemy's failed technology. This was also a lie. There was no wreckage. The mountain was empty. The scientists who had been running the energy experiment at Fordow were being held in isolation. They were being questioned by intelligence officers who did not understand the data. The energy spike had not just taken the drone. It had taken the entire record of the experiment. The hard drives in the underground lab had been wiped by the same pulse that swallowed the Sentinel. 12:30 in the afternoon. An undisclosed intelligence facility in Northern Virginia. A team of 12 analysts sat in a dark room. On the main screen, a looped video played in slow motion. It was the leaked footage from the Iranian F-4 Phantom. They had obtained it through a back-channel source in Europe 3 hours earlier. They had watched it over 500 times. A senior analyst pointed a laser at the screen. "Look at the frame rate here. At 12:30 and 15 seconds, the RQ-180 is at 38,000 feet. Its airspeed is Mach 0.7. The Iranian missile is 5 meters from the tail." He advanced the video by 1 frame. In the next frame, the missile is gone. The heat signature is gone. The drone has shifted its heading by 90 degrees. But the wings are not flexing. There is no aerodynamic stall. There is no vapor trail. It is moving as if gravity and inertia no longer apply. The director of the agency stood in the back of the room. Is it a digital manipulation? Could the Iranians have faked the footage to make us think they have a new weapon? Negative, sir. The analyst shook his head. We have analyzed the metadata and the sensor noise. The footage is authentic. The physics, however, are not. Whatever happened over Fordow was not a shot down. It was a transition. The aircraft did not crash. It was removed from our reality. The room went silent. The analysts looked at each other. They were the most brilliant minds in the defense community, and they were looking at a hole in the world. The director turned to leave. Keep this off the network. No one outside this room sees this video. If the public thinks we have lost control of the sky to something we cannot name, the panic will be worse than the war. The sun was high over the Atlantic, but for the men in that room, quote, the world had grown very cold. 3 days later, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Washington, District of Columbia. The official report sat on a mahogany desk in the West Wing. It was classified top secret. Sensitive compartmented information. It did not have a title. It was simply a collection of data points that did not add up. The Fordow incident had been scrubbed from the public record. In the media, it was a footnote about a drone crash in the Gulf. In the classified world, it was a paradigm shift. The strategic assessment was blunt. The United States had lost an RQ-180 Sentinel. The aircraft was not shot down by a missile. It was not captured by traditional electronic warfare. It was absorbed by a localized atmospheric event that remains undefined. The Iranian military was equally compromised. Their most advanced air defense battery had been bypassed. Their elite interceptor pilots had been blinded, and their most sensitive nuclear research facility had been visited by a ghost. Neither nation wanted to talk about the reality of the encounter. If the Americans admitted what they saw on the 4 footage, they would have to admit that their stealth technology was irrelevant in the face of this new factor. If the Iranians admitted the truth, they would have to acknowledge that they did not truly control the mountain at Fordow. Silence was the only logical tactical choice for both regimes. Strategic analysts in the basement of the Pentagon began to call it the Fordow paradox. It was the moment when 2 of the most powerful militaries on Earth were humbled by a force they could not categorize. Speculation among the inner circle was divided. Some believed it was a natural phenomenon triggered by high-energy physics from the centrifuges. Others feared it was a breakthrough in Iranian science that had gone out of control. A few, in whispered conversations, suggested it was something else entirely. Something watching the narrow corridor of human conflict from just outside the frame. In a quiet office in Tehran, the colonel who had flown the intercept mission sat by a window. He was no longer on flight status. He had been given a desk job in the archives, ostensibly a promotion. But in reality, a way to keep him away from other pilots. He spent his days looking at old maps, but his mind was always back in the cockpit. He remembered the blue light. He remembered the way the drone had moved. It had not behaved like a machine responding to radio waves. It had behaved like a choice. Thousands of miles away, the drone operator in Nevada was also at a desk. He was undergoing a mandatory psychological evaluation. The doctors asked him if he felt guilt for losing a multi-billion-dollar aircraft. He told them no. He did not feel guilt. He felt awe. He had seen the future of warfare, and he suspected it did not involve humans. Modern conflict is a game of numbers, altitude, speed, stealth, energy. We build machines to master these variables. We spend billions of dollars to ensure that our technology is the final word in any argument. But the Fordow incident proved that there is a limit to human mastery. There are forces in the world that do not care about borders, treaties, or regimes. The sky over the Zagros Mountains was clear again. The satellites showed nothing but rock and sand. But the world was different now. The most advanced weapons are only effective if the rules of physics remain the same. On a Tuesday morning in central Iran, those rules had been rewritten. The line between science and mystery had been crossed. Both sides had looked into the void, and, for a few seconds, the void had looked back. The global chess match would continue. But the players were now aware of a third hand on the board. The morning was still quiet. For now,